I used to dread mornings at the coop. I mean, walking out to find half the feed scratched into the mud and a family of mice having a feast? Yeah, not fun. Choosing the right feeder felt impossible because everything claimed to be waste-free but rarely was. Well, after losing way too much money on ruined feed, I finally tested the most popular options out there. Here's what matters when picking a true no-waste feeder, and wait until you see the one that completely fixed my pest problem. 6. Grandpa's Feeder's Automatic Chicken Feeder. This heavy-duty option is best for people who have a serious rat problem and are willing to train their flock. You know, when I first got this metal Treadle feeder, I had high hopes for its heavy galvanized steel build. It feels like an absolute tank. That is great if you want something that survives a literal hurricane in your backyard. The core concept is pretty simple. The chickens step onto the front plate, the metal lid opens up, and they get to eat their fill. Setting it up was straightforward out of the box, but I've got to be honest with you here, the training phase was really rough on my flock. I spent almost 2 full weeks just trying to get my hens to trust the moving parts. A few of the more skittish ones were absolutely terrified of the loud clanking noise it makes when the lid snaps shut. I mean, who wouldn't be startled by that? Once the braver birds finally figured it out, it definitely kept the local rats away. That is a huge win in my book. The feed stays completely dry inside the bin, and the birds cannot scratch it out onto the mud. But here's the major catch I ran into. If you have a mixed flock with smaller bantams or young growers, they simply do not weigh enough to trigger the opening mechanism. That basically forced me to set up a secondary feeding station anyway. 5. Tgeyd chicken feeder with 6 no-waste ports. This high-capacity bin is best for busy flock owners who want to stretch their refill days to the absolute maximum. Well, the very first thing that grabbed my attention was the sheer size of the holding bin. Pouring a whole bag of feed into one rust-proof metal box and walking away for days sounded like absolute heaven to me. The adjustable height legs are a really nice touch, allowing you to raise it up as your birds grow. I placed it right out in the main run, and the 6 PVC-style ports did a decent job of keeping the hens from sweeping their heads side to side. That lateral scratching motion is usually what empties your wallet, so stopping that behavior is huge. The riveted handles actually made it fairly easy to move around the yard, even when it was fully loaded with heavy grain. But here is where my frustration started to build up during testing. The locking lid is secure, sure, but it's actually a little too tight. I found myself wrestling with the metal hinges on cold mornings when my hands were freezing. It really shouldn't take a physical wrestling match just to top off the grain supply before work. Another annoying thing I noticed during a heavy spring downpour was the port design. While they claim it is highly weatherproof, the rain blowing in sideways still managed to get inside the bottom lip of the feeding holes. 4. KOL Chicken Feeder No Waste. This wide base feeder is best for those with large active flocks who need maximum feeding access without the usual crowding. When I unboxed this avocado green unit, the wide tripod base stood out immediately. It just felt incredibly stable on the ground. You do not have to worry about a heavy bird knocking this thing over. What I loved most during testing was the sheer number of access points. It has 16 smooth-edged feeding holes sitting comfortably low to the ground. When you have a dozen hungry birds rushing for breakfast, the extra space completely eliminates that chaotic morning pecking order drama. Everyone gets a spot. The internal baffle system actually works exactly the way they promise. It naturally guides their beaks downward into the grain. I saw a very noticeable drop in spilled pellets on the coop floor within the first few days. The powder-coated metal also held up wonderfully during my tests, showing 0 signs of rust after a few humid weeks outdoors. I mean, it is massive. That means I only had to refill the bin every couple of weeks. But you do have to be a bit careful with the feed type you choose. It handles standard pellets perfectly. However, when I switched to a powdery mash for a week, I noticed a slight backup in the gravity flow system. It's not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. You just give the side a quick tap and everything settles into place. 3. Innoland chicken feeder and waterer set. This complete combo kit is best for backyard beginners who want a ready-to-go system right out of the box. I have to admit I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of this one. You get a 26-pound feeder and a 3-gallon waterer. That is honestly exactly what you need to set up a brand new flock. It takes all the guesswork out of matching your gear. I decided to use the included long legs to set it up in my run. You can also mount it directly to the wall if you prefer that clean look. The BPA-free plastic is incredibly thick. You know how some plastic feeders feel like they will crack if you look at them wrong. Not this set. It felt totally premium in my hands. The 3 feeding ports come with these clever rodent-proof covers. I started snapping them on at night, and it completely stopped the local mice from treating my coop like a midnight buffet. Plus, the rainproof tops actually did their job perfectly when a random afternoon storm rolled through the property. The waterer features 4 anti-drip cups that kept the wood shavings bone dry. I cannot overstate how nice it is to walk into a coop and not smell damp, moldy bedding. The birds figured out how to use the drinking cups in about 5 minutes without any special training from me. Everything just works together beautifully. Sure, the plastic might eventually fade in direct sunlight after a few years of harsh summers, but the sheer convenience of having your food and water completely dialed in makes it a fantastic investment for your backyard. 2. RentACoop Metallic Treadle Feeder. This clever design is best for chicken keepers who want the rodent protection of a treadle but have birds of vastly different sizes. Okay, let's talk about the RentACoop metallic treadle feeder. Remember the major issues I had with the Grandpa's feeder earlier? Well, RentACoop basically looked at those exact problems and engineered them completely out of existence. It is a massive step up in usability. The very first thing I tested was the adjustable weight setting on the step plate. You can actually dial in exactly how much pressure is needed to open the lid. This meant my little Silkies and my heavy Orpingtons could finally share the very same feeder without anyone getting locked out of breakfast. The training process was also so much smoother this time around. The lid features a specialized dampening mechanism. It does not slam down like a loud mousetrap and terrify the entire flock. It closes quietly and gently. I mean, my hens were eating comfortably out of it on day 2. It holds a very generous amount of feed. The deep trough design physically prevents them from hooking their beaks in and dragging the grain out. I watched my most stubborn hen try her usual sideways sweeping trick, and she just couldn't do it. The feed stayed exactly where it belonged, inside the box. Honestly, if you have a serious wild bird or rat problem, this is a phenomenal solution. It keeps the food locked down tight at night, holds up against nasty weather, and accommodates a mixed flock beautifully. It gave me serious peace of mind knowing my feed bill was finally under control. Omlet no-waste chicken feeder. This absolute game changer is best for anyone who wants a flawlessly clean coop and zero wasted grain. The Omlet no-waste chicken feeder, I do not say this lightly, but this feeder completely changed how I manage my entire coop. I tested the 25-pound version, and the engineering behind the design is just incredibly smart and effective. Instead of using open troughs or complex moving parts, it relies on an enclosed UV-stabilized polymer hopper. The anti-scratch feeding ports are the real magic here. When my hens stick their heads inside, the internal dividers physically prevent them from thrashing the food around. I placed a clean black tray under it for a full week just to check for waste. You know what I found on that tray? Nothing. Literally just a few tiny specks of dust. It was actually mind-blowing to see a feeder live up to its name perfectly. The integrated rain canopy is another massive win. It shields the ports so effectively that even during a driving, windy rainstorm, the pellets inside stayed completely crisp and dry. It also mounts beautifully to the side of the metal run, keeping it off the ground entirely. This means absolutely no bedding gets kicked up into the food. Mice have a nearly impossible time climbing up the smooth sides to reach the feeding ports. It remains remarkably clean day after day.